and as I said, look after the careers consultants who work in the humanities. My colleague who is very ably doing all the background work, Lydia. Lydia, I don't know if you want to say hi.
Hi everyone, lovely to see so many of you dialing into the panel this afternoon. You're in for a really great hour. Yeah, my name's Lydia. I work in the employer engagement team. We look after all the employer events that you attend throughout the year. Shall I throw over to the panelists?
Excellent, that'd be great.
Are we starting with Phoebe?
Yes.
Hi, just checking you can all hear me. Brilliant, I got a good nod from you. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name's Phoebe. I'm a trainee solicitor at Evershed Sutherland. I did a classical studies degree back in 2016 to 2019 at the University of Bristol. And shortly after that, I did the graduate diploma in law, then took a couple of years because of the pandemic causing a bit of a halt on the legal journey, but had some other work in another industry, and then came back to law, studied my LPC and started my training contract here in 2023. So nearly at the end now. We'll be kind of finishing in August and qualifying then. So yeah, it's been a really great journey so far. Don't know if I want to hand over to...
Oh, pick someone off the list. I think possibly Nilly might be next. Yeah, Nilly.
Hi everyone, I'm Nilly. I went to QM from 2011 to 2014 where I studied history. And then after that I did the GDL and then I did the LPC. And during the LPC I applied for some vacation schemes and then I worked as a paralegal and I got a training contract with Pennington's Manchester Cooper, where I started in 2021, and then I qualified into their commercial IP IT team, and then I was offered a secondment at Vitality, and so I moved in-house, and then now I've moved to another insurer in the city, and I've been qualified for 3.5 years. I'll pass on to Anya.
Hi everyone, so I'm Anya and I studied English Lit at Queen Mary, which I really enjoyed. I wasn't ready to go into law just yet. And I did the same route, so I did GDL, LPC. I did both of those part-time just to help with my funds, so I was working part-time as well. I worked at a firm called Saunders Solicitors and I did public inquiry work as a paralegal, and then luckily, I was very happy to get a training contract with them because they were just happy with my work. So I did a training contract with them, which was criminal defence and public inquiry. So I worked on the Grenfell inquiry with them. And now I'm qualified, which is great, qualified solicitor.
Grand. I think last panelist is Liam.
Hi everyone, my name's Liam. I'm a second year trainee at Decker. I was Queen Mary in 2016 to 2019. I studied English and film studies. After I graduated, I then self-funded the GDL part-time, and then I completed my LPC. As I say, I am due to qualify in August of this year.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Liam. So as you see from our panel, they have all been through the older training route, the GDL, the LPC, and so that's why we've got this special bit at the end when we're thinking about the SQE. So again, if you've got questions about that, we'll be kind of releasing that information, having a little bit of a rundown from Sarah later and questions. But questions to the panel, I'd love to ask you all, you are all obviously doing degrees, nothing to do with law, and it'd be great to hear from a few of you. What made you change from, or what sparked the idea to go from another subject to law, and what kind of confirmed that in your mind? This is a great idea.
I'm happy to start that off. So I realised that studying classical studies, as much as I completely adored my degree, it was kind of by definition very much stuck in the past. And although I could challenge authorities or reinterpret old ancient texts, it was not really going to have that much either forward-looking focus or really any sort of client contact or anything like that. So I was looking for something that was going to be much more kind of commercial focused, something which would allow me to have that client interaction, and also something that was going to keep on sort of developing and I could really get into the details of. And I think for me, when I was kind of considering a change into law, it was knowing just how big the law is. And I think what's already evident with this panel is that we're all doing such different things all under the umbrella of law. So I was really intrigued just by how vast it was and how many different things there were that I could kind of experience and get involved in. So that made it quite a clear kind of switch from it's just kind of that same focus as classics, and that there's so many different things that you can do, but it's just much more forward looking than my degree was.
That's really helpful. Anyone else want to come on that question?
Yeah, I guess I would add there's so many transferable skills that you learn in history that I've applied to law. So, you know, at history, you look at loads of different sources, different historians, and then you're meant to distill all of that into a short essay. And it's really similar in law. You know, you look at different sources, you look at online kind of guidance, you look at different cases, and then you have to kind of translate that into a language that the client's going to understand. And it helps with like general research tasks as well that you have. So I think for me, it was just, yeah, quite an easy comparison and an easy switch because you're using the same parts of your brain, but just differently, I guess.
I love that. That is, yeah. I look after history, so it's great to hear all the history skills. Really useful in law. Let me ask a question on that. Lots of students I see will say that's great. I like my subject, but it's hard to pivot to something different and look credible to employers. Okay, so I'd love to know, what did you do to look as good as a law student, essentially, with maybe your knowledge or your interest in law? What specifically did you do to do that? That's my question, and anyone could come in on that one.
Sure. Yeah, I can take this one. So that was a question from the outset by the careers department when I was at Queen Mary. They were like, well, how do you convince a law firm, you know, that you are ultimately interested in law, and in my case, commercial law? The answer that they kind of gave me was, well, it kind of really boils down to work experience. Obviously, it's very difficult to secure vacation schemes, insight days, but there are some organisations. So the one that I'm partnered with and have been since first year as an undergrad was Aspiring Solicitors. They're very useful in that respect, particularly from you know, if you're from an underrepresented background, and it's free membership. They have a plethora of events that you can join. They have professional ambassadors at different firms that you can then message privately. So that was something that I did from first year onwards, was to try and chat to various different ambassadors, find out more about their kind of roles in the firms, questions that, and really have contact with them and ask them questions that you otherwise perhaps wouldn't get to ask, even at insight events where you've got, you know, a couple of trainees and they're surrounded by 10, 15 kind of eager candidates. Then it's difficult to actually ask kind of more personalized questions. So that was definitely a resource that I used. But yeah, I think from my perspective, it boiled down to work experience, both legal and non-legal. There is obviously definite transferable skills, so it's just trying to find out stuff that you're interested in and then looking at what you've done in those kind of work experience, and how that kind of translates into the firm and what they're interested in. So yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Liam. Anyone else want to comment on that one? Anything specifically they did? That's some really great ideas there. Anyone got any further ideas what they did to kind of pivot and look credible in this law marketplace?
So I agree with Liam. I think work experience is definitely key if you can try to obtain that. But it's, I think, just so that it can be so difficult, especially if you're looking at these commercial firms. So even if you look at your high street firm, even if you put in a speculative application, speak to the reception, ask for a week, at least when you're starting out, that gives you just an initial contact and you can kind of build it from there. But there's also great like opportunities like volunteering. So I know Queen Mary, I think, has quite a lot of volunteering that you can be able to do with law, but also there's an organisation, Free Representation Unit, which you do employment cases and they train you and you help, and it's volunteering, but it gives you that experience, and then you can meet people along the way and kind of build from there.
That's superb. Yes, you're absolutely right. So there is a legal advice centre which you can get work experience through. That's very possible, but also absolutely volunteering with organizations that might have a legal entity or advising people. Citizens Advice Bureau, I don't know if that's still recommended, but that's certainly a useful thing to do, to be aware of lots of different areas. Can I just, I guess, a bit of a straw poll to the panel? Who managed to get a kind of, and just maybe a raise of the hand, a kind of major summer internship with a kind of law firm as such? Those kind of, one of those ones that you apply along with thousands and you hope for the best. Okay, so I'd love to know a little bit more about that process. And I wonder, Nili, if you're able to tell us about that experience, and it'd be great to hear from the panelists who secured work experience in other ways. What did they do? Because I think with the students I talked to, there's an aspiration for the big sort of summer schemes, but it's pretty hard, and that's the kind of reality that seems to be there. So Nili, over to you. We'd love to hear how you do it, and then we'd also love to hear from those who've had to sort of hustle another way to get that law experience. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I'll say that I don't have any like legal contacts. Like my parents are immigrants. No, I don't know any lawyers, so I kind of had to hustle as well. I got a vacation scheme with CMS, and I didn't have that much legal experience. I just had like work experience at a high street firm, like working in their kind of conveyancing, and that was just by, you know, as Anya said, like handing in the application face to face. I think that actually goes a long way these days. And then, yeah, for specifically CMS, I went to their open days, which are, you know, I don't think back in my day, it wasn't that strict of a like application process like the VAC schemes. You could just kind of apply and then you get put on the open day, or they have open evenings as well. And then through there, I spoke to some of the associates there. And so when I was making the vacation scheme application, I then put down their names and said, oh, it was so interesting to speak to X person about what case they're working on. So you kind of personalize your application, and that as well goes a long way. And the recruiter kind of knew who I was. So that helps a lot as well. And then I actually didn't get that vacation scheme. I think looking back, I was just not prepared enough for it, and that's fine as well. And then when I went on to do my LPC, I applied again, and I got two others. So one was Mills and Reeves in Cambridge, and the other one was Pennington's, where I qualified into. So I kind of did a similar process with them, attended their open evenings, open days, and I think the more practice you get at these things, like the better and more kind of relaxing it would be, as much as it can be in like a corporate setting. So yeah, I would definitely recommend just personalizing, going over and above what others would do. And in terms of applications, I would definitely focus on a select few rather than hundreds, because then you can't really do that personalized approach.
I absolutely love the fact that you went along in person and yeah, made that introduction. And I think that's so powerful. Everyone's on email, everyone's on LinkedIn, but that personal approach, that's really interesting. And the rest of our panel, how about that kind of initial work experience? How did you get it? What are the sort of secrets you could pass on?
Yep, happy to answer that. Again, as I mentioned earlier, so my initial kind of port of call was Aspiring Solicitors. They had quite a lot of events at Queen Mary, and even in the city. So I kind of came to university not really knowing anyone in law at all. So they were a really good kind of introduction into what, you know, commercial law in London could look like for me. So they would often answer a lot of my questions. And with those kind of events that they put on, it was just a simple kind of apply process. Just tell us a bit about your motivation for joining university, what you're doing at the moment, much more sort of softer kind of questions. And then that from there kind of snowballed really into like informal mentoring schemes that they offered. And then at the time whilst I was doing my undergrad degree, my supervisor effectively sort of put me forward or kind of mentioned that there's this company called Target Jobs, and they do different awards that you could go for. So I went for Male Undergraduate of the Year, I think in my second year, and that was then sponsored by a company. So I did pretty well. So then L'Oreal was sponsoring it, so I ended up working in kind of corporate finance, but kind of at that point pivoted and said, actually, I'm really interested in law. So I got to shadow the general counsel there. So then the point is I didn't do kind of a VAC scheme or anything. I kind of had these different experiences through Aspiring Solicitors, through various other kind of awards, and then when it comes to then applying, then I could then leverage that work experience that way. So that was kind of how I approached everything.
That's really great. I like that. It's a very we'd call it sort of planned happenstance in careers theory. You put yourself in the way of opportunity. You're not quite sure how it'll work out, but through those stepping stones, you kept putting yourself in the way and kept asking the questions, and then you got the kind of experience that you needed in a very different way to perhaps people might have expected. That's a great story. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what it's like to actually be in a law environment. You know, what are we doing day to day? What things are you working on? And that could be something you've worked on recently, or just simply over the time you've been within your firms, just to give people a flavour of what work they could do if they follow a career as a solicitor.
So yeah, so day to day, I think it's so different. It's a cliche thing to say, I know, but it is actually really different just because it's a broad area. So I can only speak from my experiences, which will be so different from the panelists that are on today. But one thing that kind of reigns true for everyone is usually we have time recording. So it's 6-minute intervals of tasks, and you have to, sometimes some firms have billing targets, so you have to do so much hours of work every day. Some firms are more relaxed with their billing targets or don't really have them as long as you get the tasks done. So that kind of is throughout all law firms. But my day-to-day was really different depending on what seat I was in. So with Grenfell, that was just a very, very lucky opportunity that I was able to be in the firm at that point, to be able to take it on, because it's not something that carries on throughout. It's finished now. They've done the report. My day-to-day with that was we were working with 13 different firms as well as our own firm, and we were working with a lot of different counsels, so barristers. Counsel is kind of the legal term for barristers throughout. And my day-to-day would be going through the document review. So that would mean analysing documents to see what was relevant to a theme. So the inquiry is broken down in different modules. So for instance, I worked on government. So I would have to think of what bills, maybe was there any kind of negativity, was there any fire safety that you can tell by their emails that wasn't really taken very seriously by ministers or MPs, and just kind of see flaws of whatever witness was attending that day, or even positives. You would put those forward and then you would draft lines of questions. So that would be one of the big tasks that I had to do. It would also be presenting witnesses on the inquiry. So as I said, government. So a minister would come in for the day and we would be like, so how did you deal with building regulations? What role did you play? What was your experience? How long were you a minister? And you would kind of think of these questions to ask them to get to theme, or to put forward the concerns that you had, i.e. maybe lack of understanding, because they were only a minister and they didn't have that experience, and they came in and they weren't sure what was going on, which unfortunately we saw a lot in government. So that was kind of my day-to-day with inquiry work, which I really loved.
Sounds really interesting, and quite a unique case it sounds, and got you to look at lots of different aspects of laws, lots of different stakeholders. Yeah, that's grand. Anyone else want to come in on what they do kind of day to day, what kind of law occupies their time?
Yeah, so my day-to-day is completely different to that. I haven't had anything to do with kind of court procedure or witnesses or anything yet, because I haven't done my transactional seat. I haven't done my contentious seat yet. Sorry, so that's the seat where you're kind of arguing, you're kind of doing something court related, so litigation, employment, those sort of ones. So far my training contract's all been very transactional work. So in corporate or restructuring or financial services, it's all sort of, you come in, you have a look at what the daily updates have been in terms of commercial awareness. Is there anything that I've seen that is going to be important for my client or for my team to know? And if there is, I'd probably look at flagging it to the team, just letting them know that I've seen something. And you can kind of follow that on, see if anyone wants to put together a kind of client briefing on a certain matter. And then you normally have quite a few things to get to throughout the day. So if you like having a to-do list and you like ticking them off, then I would say corporate commercial law is it's very good for that. There's normally a lot of different projects going on at the same time. You're very much actively encouraged to try and get as much of a variety as you can in your seat. So yeah, you'd be looking at it kind of maybe a research task, maybe a client call that you're going to be on film for, or yeah, just sort of any sort of commercial focused task. It does very much vary like every day. So yeah, very different experience.
That's grand. Thanks very much, Phoebe. Appreciate that. And next question for, I guess, the panel. And before I sort of say this question, if you're a student on the call with us, we'd love to, after my next question, to take your questions. So do be typing in the chat things you'd like to know from our panelists, and that could be to do with how they got their work experience, how they find it day to day, what sort of things they found challenging in the role, and any other questions you have. So please do put those in. So my next question to, I guess, the panel is thinking about, were there any barriers you found you needed to overcome, particularly for coming from a non-law background? Is there anything you found that you need to do on top? Did you find yourself reading certain things or going to certain information sources? Did you have, any kind of imposter syndrome? You thought, oh gosh, I haven't done a 3-year law degree. This is hard. So just anything about the kind of the emotional and also the practical journey of coming from a long law background, breaking into a competitive field like law.
Yeah, I guess I'll go. Yeah, I think for me, I firstly had no idea like what a lawyer does. So I think kind of getting to grips with what that is, and obviously it's catch-22 because then you need work experience to figure that out, and then work experience is so difficult to get. So you're kind of stuck in this kind of endless web. And I only got my training contract during my LPC, so it did take a while, and you go through several failures. Like I didn't get the CMS one, I think, because I definitely had imposter syndrome. I had no idea. I kind of felt out of my depth and I didn't feel comfortable. And I think as much as, you know, people say it's a two-way process, like it's true, I think you need to feel comfortable in the environment that you're in. And if you think that you're constant, you know, you have really bad anxiety, or you just don't want to be there, then I think that is a sign for you to apply elsewhere, or kind of reconsider your options and think, if I still want to do law, then what type of law it actually interests me. Because I think at the beginning I just wanted a job, I wanted a training contract. I didn't really kind of focus on why or what environment. And I think it was only when I started to ask myself those questions was when I started to be more successful in actually getting, you know, vacation schemes and getting interviews, etc. So yeah, it's really hard. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, yeah, it's a hard process. And for some people, it's, you know, they get it in their second year of uni, and that's great for them. But you know, for others it takes longer. And I think you just need to not compare yourself to other people. It's not a race. I think if you really want it, then it will happen for you. But it might, yeah, you know, you'll take a different route to it, that's all. But I think, yeah, you shouldn't kind of like give up, because we've all been there. You know, I've definitely felt up and down, and now I kind of feel, you know, really confident. Like, I know what I'm doing at my job, and I love it. And you know, sometimes it is actually the environment and not, you know, law that is the issue, or you know, it's not you, it's actually, yeah, other factors. So I think, yeah, that would be my advice overall.
That's great. That's great. And I think that really speaks volumes to a lot of students. And just and it's interesting, you talked about the kind of fit in the firm, and actually you weren't quite ready for the opportunity, and with hindsight you're like, oh, maybe that didn't work out for a reason. No, I think that's really helpful. Anyone else, anything particularly coming from that non-law background, any thoughts on that?
I think on that, just kind of echoing what Nilly said, is just don't compare yourself, because I definitely had the tendency to do that. I thought I was going to be kind of a step behind because, yeah, other people had 3 years of law ahead of me. But it's not the case of like you're going to turn up on the day and people are expecting you to quote case law or know precedents off the top of your head. It's still so valued having a non-law degree, because it does just give you so many different ways of looking at things and different approaches, and you haven't been taught necessarily for 3 years how to study something. So you're coming at it with a fresh pair of eyes and potentially a different interpretation of things. So I think on that, just don't try and compare yourself, just stick with what you want to do and find the firm that works for you, instead of trying to be like other people, and you know, who are going to be on, like Nilly said, on their own paths anyway. So yeah, just kind of echoing that sentiment.
That's super helpful. Thank you. We're going to turn to student questions now, and we'll just start from the top, and we'll just roll down. Some of them will be repeats, and then we can kind of run over them. But just a question around, and we've got a lot of master's students who are international students, and just for the panel, that will usually mean that maybe there's a 10 or 20 hour restriction on the work they can do, and many will be here maybe in the country for a year, and then a couple of years afterwards on a graduate visa, and quite often people are looking for a bit of experience while they study, so any part-time work or part-time roles. So I don't know if any of you can suggest ways. Let's imagine you're an international student, you're on a master's course, and you just want some legal experience while you're in the UK, and maybe you haven't got time or the experience for a massive summer internship to be eligible for that. But anything you can do throughout the year, or any charity work or any volunteering you could do, what would you do, I guess, to build experience if you're in that position, getting experience during the year that you're actually studying with us? Any thoughts? Or if you draw a blank, that's fine as well.
I guess you can actually attend court. Like, a lot of public like courts are free, so you can actually attend and go to, like, you know, different hearings and stuff. So that's, I don't know how you'd find out about timings, but I know like friends have done that. So I think that's quite an easy way to say that you're interested in the law, and yeah, it's free.
Is there any particular courts you'd recommend for the drama or the practicality of things?
There's there's the High Court, the court, like Royal Courts of Justice, or even just like county courts. Like I think a lot of them you can go through. Or there's yeah, I can't remember which one, like the Court of like Technology, etc. Yeah.
That's very helpful. So suggestion there, actually go and see the legal process in action, see what happens in a courtroom. That will definitely get you brownie points. Anyone else want to come on that way, or that question, sorry, something to do part-time while you study? If not, I've got a few ideas.
I don't know if they're still available, so I'm sorry if this is not the case, but because I was kind of trying to get into law during COVID, I ended up doing a sort of online virtual sort of introduction to M&A, I think it was. And I think there are still some platforms that do that. And although it doesn't give you obviously like experience of being in an office, I remember actually being really quite helpful because I think we were looking at things like reading an NDA or putting together a client presentation. So yeah, I did some sort of virtual application and virtual workshop that, yeah, did put me actually in quite good stead to then talk about in an interview. So
that's super helpful. And the site that quite often gets recommended is Forage, so Forage internships, that's a good one, or Bright Network is another one for folks who want to check that kind of thing out. Other ideas, there's obviously the Law Society, various law societies at QM, and again, you're then with like-minded folk who are trying to go on the same journey. I believe there's also a Law for Non-Law Student Society. Again, that's a great place to meet like minds who are trying to go on the training contract journey, or simply looking at other routes, such as the SQE, which I'll talk about later. Other things you can do is some of the transferable skills. So some of our panelists talked about problem-solving skills, teamwork, leadership, showing initiative, and doing things a little bit different. And we talked about Liam with awards and things like that. And obviously, you have to do things that qualify you for that. And those are kind of, I guess, slightly non-traditional ways to stand out in a competitive market. All right, let's look and see other questions. Okay, we're choosing between the different types of law. Where did you apply to be a certain lawyer? Corporate, since you didn't do a law degree. Let me see if I understand that question. I'm guessing that's choosing between different types of law, and then obviously you applying for different companies. So if you wanted to do a specific type of law, was that then, did it narrow down your choices when you were applying for training contracts, or did you just think, you know what, I'll take anything, I'm happy just to apply, see what hits, and I'll take that? So yeah, was it a targeted approach based on your personal interest, or was it a more let's just take what I can get? Anyone want to come on that one?
I think my approach was more targeted. I think you begin by kind of being a bit more broader, but then I learned to be more targeted. I think because when you type in law firms, you'll come up with Magic Circle, you'll come up with Silver Circle, and all these lawcareer.net, and they'll always kind of prioritize the big city firms, which are great. They provide great training. They're very competitive though, and sometimes it can narrow your viewpoint. So there are actually loads of, they call them boutique firms. So those are like smaller firms that are still doing very interesting work. So I think just like I think it's very easy to go quite narrow in your approach, but try to broaden it out, because I found that I just decided on my targeted approach by my work experience. So I did paralegal work in criminal defense, family, property. And I realized what I really enjoyed was client facing work rather than doing more kind of not seeing a client. Maybe some solicitors will have that. They won't really see a client. It'll be more maybe emails or that kind of way. So you kind of see what you enjoy most about the experience, and then you can kind of target your areas from that. So because I thought client facing is what I enjoyed, I really enjoy seeing improvements in people's lives and kind of that social welfare aspect. I knew that corporate wasn't really my route. So I went more for the kind of smaller client-facing social welfare firms.
Okay, that's really interesting. So because you have that specific interest, you then target your applications at the firms that would be in sympathy with that. Yeah, I think that's great. We're going to move on. I know there's lots of other opinions I could get from the panel on that one, but we have another question, and this relates to, now obviously this person is talking about the SQE process of training, but you guys will have been through GDL, LPC, and the question is really, how on earth do you fund this? Okay, and obviously there will be friends and family. Might be a big route. It might be loans. It might be part-time work. But I'd love to know how people manage that journey, because it's not a cheap step, and you have to be pretty committed to that. So yeah, any thoughts from the panel about how you fund this and how you make it through?
From my own experience, whilst I was an undergrad, there was a startup round the corner from QM actually that had reached out to the careers team and were looking for callers. They're basically a market research startup, and they wanted people to make, it was part-time work, commission based. So then I basically joined very early on, and then from first year onwards, when I had a few hours between classes or after kind of being in the library or whatever, then I would occasionally do a few hours of work and then try and save where possible. So I did that for a number of years. So then that helped when it came to kind of graduating and looking at, well, how do I fund the GDL? So the decision I made was to go part-time. So I think the way I did it was like split over 2 years and then in 8 installments or so. So then I knew exactly what needed to be paid when, and then it was a case of doing the GDL part-time work the weekend so I could work full-time during the week. And I ended up taking on a full-time analyst role at this company, but that allowed me both to work and then over the weekends then I could study and have that sort of separation, but equally leverage it when it came to interviews and saying, look, actually I'm trying to balance both of this. This is easy, but I'm trying to show my commitment to law. So I appreciate not everyone can do that, but that was kind of my experience, and fortunately my firm sponsored my LPC, so that was fine. But yeah, that was how I kind of approached the GDL.
That's very helpful, Liam. And I think a lot of the students I speak to, will have to think quite hard about how that is funded and how you do it. Some people do part-time work, a mix of potentially a government loan. If you do a master's conversion with SQE, which is some of the new types of conversions coming out from the likes of BPP and the University of Law, that is eligible for the sort of 12 point whatever £1,000 government help, but doesn't cover your living costs, which is the thing that often is expensive, especially if you're doing it in London. Right, I appreciate. I think Anya, you need to jump off the call at this point, so I'll say thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for taking the time just to listen to what we have to say. I hope it was helpful for you all. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Anya, really appreciate it. We now have the rest of the panelists are staying with us, and we're going to have a little update on the SQE process. So our law careers consultant Sarah is going to join the call and take us through for about 5-10 minutes the new SQE process and how that works. And then if you have any questions specifically regards to that process, Sarah will be happy to take them. And also she has said for those on this call, you can ring up the careers service and ask to book in for an appointment with her. Usually they're not sort of only available to law students, but if you say, look, you are on the law for non-law session, and Andy and Sarah say it's good for you to book in, then they'll book you in for a session with her if you have any further questions, but do ask them today. Sarah, over to you, and hopefully you've joined the call. Do we know if Sarah's on the call?
Sarah, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah, yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, yeah, it's great.
Okay. Okay. So, did you hear me introduce myself, or should I go with that again?
Go from the top. Go from the top. Yeah, we didn't hear anything.
Okay. So I'm Sarah. I'm the law careers consultant, and basically the person you go to in Queen Mary when you have questions of getting into law. And I'm going to go over the way to get into law very briefly for non-law students. This is a whistle-stop tour. There's a lot of little caveats and things to keep in mind. But of course, if this is something you're considering seriously, as Andy just mentioned, you're welcome to bring up, book an appointment, and we can go over your specific circumstances in more detail. Okay, so going over the pathway to qualify, and this is more about the solicitor qualification pathway. If you are interested in the bar, we can address that, but in that case, you will have to do a qualifying law degree. So either a GDL or an LLB degree will be mandatory. So about the solicitor pathway, there's two main aspects to it: the academic bit and the SQE, and then the work experience bit. The academic bit and the SQE, any degree technically qualifies. You don't have to have done a law degree. You don't have to do GDL. You do have to do the SQE. The SQE split into two parts, and part one will test your knowledge of the law of England and Wales as it will be taught to an LLB student here. Yeah. So all the areas like land, trust, criminal, contract, tort law, all the areas, it's going to test your theory of all of those. So while you can technically give the SQE exam without actually studying for it, I wouldn't highly recommend that, simply because a lot of the things you would just not know. And the SQE is, to put it mildly, not the easiest exam to clear. And the pass rates are less than 50%. I don't want to make it sound like all gloom and doom, so I'll not go too much into that. But of course, you can do the GDL. You can technically study for it yourself. Having done law, I wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot, but it's your choice if you want to. If you do get a training contract, there are some firms that will fund your GDL and SQE. I know that's a question that has been coming up. There are some firms that will fund that. So if that's somebody's concern. SQE2 is testing your skills. So these are things like advocacy, writing arguments. These things, again, you're going to learn about them in an SQE course or skills you pick up in a law degree, but it's not going to be as theoretical as SQE1 is. You could do the GDL and the SQE course, but the SQE course in itself, just the SQE course, is only going to teach you how to actually answer the questions, not the theory part. It will assume you already know the theory. So if you've not done a law degree, you would ideally want to do a GDL or a conversion course. There's some offered by different places. King's offers one as well. BPP, University of Law, of course. Barbary started some. So there's quite a few available. You do that, and then you do the SQE course, which may be part of your GDL, a continuation of that, or something you just do separately. The second element is the qualifying work experience. I'm sorry I'm going over this really quickly, but I'm trying to cover the important bits. So the qualifying work experience can be 2 years in up to 4 different places. This doesn't have to be in the UK. It doesn't have to be in England and Wales. It can be anywhere in the world. There are certain criteria you need to meet for it to qualify as qualifying work experience. There is a long list for these on the SRA website, so I would recommend going over that. But typically think like a training contract, paralegal work, in-house practice, these will usually qualify. You could work as a paralegal, then do the SQE, most people do the SQE first and then the training contract. But for a training contract, you will need to complete the SQE before that, before you actually get onto your training contract. If you do have a training contract, like I mentioned, a lot of firms will fund the SQE for you, the exam fee, as well as the training bit of it. And you then go on to your 2 years of qualifying work experience. And after that, you essentially just are qualified and you apply to the SRA with your with the SQE and your qualifying work experience, and you're a qualified solicitor on the SRA role. And yeah, that's essentially it. And then you want an associate level job. I hope that kind of makes sense. I know it was really quick going over everything, but does anybody have any questions on that? I think you can put them in the chat.
Yeah, if you've got questions to relate to the SQE, now is your time to just write them in the chat. I'll also look back through the chat and see if there's any particularly that are pertinent to this particular area.
So how many years does it take? It honestly, a very lawyer answer, but it depends. So you do need 2 years of qualifying work experience, which is a standard 2 years. If you've not done a law degree and you do the GDL and the SQE course, that's going to take about a little over a year and then a few months to, for when you find the date for the exam. So put together, that does take about a year and a half, 2 years to get through the SQE bit if you've not done a law degree. Somebody's asked, can you get the qualifying work experience before the SQE, or does the SQE have to happen first? So you can do it after you can do the qualifying work experience before or after the SQE. If you are doing a training contract though, most firms, or as far as I know, I don't know of any firm that lets you do the SQE after the qualifying work experience, but for a training contract, you will do the SQE before the training contract begins.
So we've got a question, would you need to do the SQE before getting a training contract? And so your answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. So if you've done a training yeah, you would need to do the SQE before that. You don't have to do it before you apply for the training contract, but before you begin the training contract, yes. So there's somebody asked, yeah, I've done an LLB in India, still do you need to do the GDL? You don't technically need to. There is difference in the law in India and England and Wales in certain areas like land law, trusts, criminal law. These are different from one country to the other, one jurisdiction to the other. So you could, of course, choose to study for them yourself, or you could do the GDL to study for those areas. But essentially, you need to know the theory. Whether you decide to do a GDL for it or self-study, that is entirely your choice. And you can contact the career service to book a session. You wouldn't find them on Target Connect directly to book, but I think we can put the contact number in the chat. I don't remember it offhand. If somebody remembers it offhand, can you please put the career service contact number in the chat for where they can book appointments?
Yeah, I can do that now.
Yep, thank you. So what are the specific exemptions available to Indian lawyers who've qualified the bar exam and have 2.5 years of experience? So there aren't any specific exemptions particularly for that. You can apply for an exemption. Exemptions are granted on a case-by-case basis. There are some general guidelines of whether you're likely to get an exemption or not. But also keep in mind that the SQE has only been around 3 years. So it's not something that's been around for a very long time. And there isn't a lot of precedent because of that. But they essentially take a few weeks, few months, decide on a case-by-case basis of whether they're going to give you the exemption or not. And based on that, you can decide what you're going to do. You could get an exemption from the qualifying work experience bit. Use that to then be a qualified solicitor, in which case that will change your trajectory quite a bit, and it'll be a lot to go in right now, but if you want to, you can of course book an appointment and we can go over that in more detail.
That's great. I think that is the end of the questions. I'm sure our panelists are glad they didn't go through the SQE. I don't know. Whatever generation you enter law in, there's always something that's going to be challenging. And I think the new process is keeping a high bar of folks. Sarah, thank you so much for that expertise coming on the line. As said, if that has piqued your interest, and you have more detailed questions about the SQE, then Monday to Friday, 9:30 till 5, call that number and ask to have an appointment with Sarah, and just say, Sarah said you can have one, and they'll book you in. We're almost at 5, so I've got, we might have a few more minutes for questions. So if you've got a burning question, do put it in the box. But my final question to the panel is, as you all came from non-law backgrounds, what difference do you think that background has made to you as a solicitor? What sort of extra, or what kind of value add do you think it's brought as you've gone into the legal career, and yeah, has made it a kind of a joyous journey? Yeah.
So I would say in my experience, my background in film has helped probably the most when it comes to interacting with clients. One example I can recall quite recently, I was invited to a client dinner where they'll generally pair the juniors off with one another to chat and to network. And obviously, as you do, you got sort of strike up conversation about your background, what you did at university, where did you go, etc. And obviously, the reaction I have since joining Deca, and was the case at that dinner, was like, "Oh, what's your favourite film? Like, why did you do film? Can you operate a camera?" And the answer is, "No, I can't operate a camera." But yeah, the point is, it kind of brings it. I think a non-law, in some instances, can bring a kind of different take or different experience that you potentially, compared to, say, some of the other people in my intake that are straight law, it be like an interview stage or informal coffee chats whilst you're trying to find out what kind of firms work for you. Often, I think sometimes that breadth of experience can be very useful when interacting with clients or even other members of the team. Just me telling people in my team today that I had this event kind of prompted, "Oh, so what did you study?" And then obviously then it becomes, "Oh, what's your favorite film?" Or, "That's really interesting. How did you pivot?" Like, they're the kind of things that I think can be very valuable and appreciated by different firms, and when you're chatting to colleagues and peers as well.
Liam, it does beg the question, what is your favorite film?
Ooh, Shawshank Redemption, probably.
Nice. God, the legal process and redemption all in one. What a winner. If you haven't seen Shawshank Redemption, it's a recommend from me too. Phoebe, how about yourself? What has really, you coming from a different background, what do you think it's added to your law career?
I think it does really give you something, kind of like what Liam said, it does just help with an icebreaker, and it does really just give you something a little bit different to everyone else. And I had it that at an assessment centre, a part of it was that you had to give a presentation to a partner. You were told it was going to be about a 10-minute presentation with 15 minutes of questions afterwards. And nowhere in the instructions did they say it had to be a legal presentation. So I turned up and everyone there on the day was doing all these very complicated, very legal focused ones. And then someone said, "Oh, what are you going to do your presentation on?" And I was comparing Donald Trump to the Roman emperors and gave this like very passionate presentation on it. And having been told that the partner was going to have 15 minutes worth of questions, I then obviously finished and I said, "Do you have anything?" And he was just like, "I did not expect that. Can you just tell me more about it? Like, just, I don't have any questions, just talk." And so that was just such a nice thing, that when you can show your, whatever subject it is, as long as you can show that you're passionate about it and there's a reason why you're studying it, I think that comes across really, really well in interviews and like across your career when you're talking to new people.
Yeah, that's a really nice example. And it sounds like they were kind of slightly taken aback at your just interest, knowledge outside of law, and it surprised them.
Definitely, yeah. I don't think they were expecting that. So
that's a really good example. And Nili, anything that you think that's come through from a different background?
Yeah, just to reiterate what the guys have said, but yeah, it just makes you a bit more well-rounded. And I think a lot of law, yeah, as I said before, is like explaining kind of difficult things, like simplifying difficult things. And I think, you know, a history degree for me like really helped with that, because I was constantly doing it for 3 years. And yeah, so I think, yeah, it gives you a different conversation topic. I don't think it was, you know, a negative at all for me. I think, yeah, it kind of, yeah, it makes you a lot more well-rounded, yeah, in conversations, etc. So yeah, and it doesn't matter if it's, you know, history or like science or another subject. I think it's all valuable. And yeah, as Phoebe said, as long as you're passionate about it, and I think that's what kind of comes through.
That's grand. Thank you. Well, I must say it's been fabulous to have you've been a brilliant panel answering lots of questions. What we'll do is myself and Sarah and Lydia will hang around for sort of 5-10 minutes. If you've got further questions you want to put in the chat, then please do so. But we'd love to uphold our commitment to the panel 4 till 5. So we'd love to give you your time back now and just say thank you so much again. Thank you for your wisdom and for sort of, you know, bringing back some of your knowledge. It's been really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, guys, if you're a student on the call and you've still got questions that you don't think have been answered, myself and Sarah can take any questions now. There's a question with regards, let me just go through the chat. Do you think politics and IR can help with being a solicitor? As you've just heard there, yeah, absolutely. So you will have a different skill set, you'll have a different international outlook, you'll start to understand some of the complex inner workings of processes around institutions in the UK and both internationally. That is going to make you a different kind of candidate when you're starting to understand EU law, UK law, the intersection, how things work. So absolutely. And then it'll be what work experience do you build on top of that? What are your interests? As we've said. Another question here then. What is some advice? Oh, sorry, it's just lost that one. Let's have a look. What some advice would you give second year law student in terms of what kind of work experience they should gain? If anything, should prepare them for a transition into law. We spoke a little bit about that earlier in the panel, but Sarah, I wonder if you might give a few examples of some great work experience you've seen for people maybe pivoting into law.
Yeah. The biggest thing I would recommend is try to go out and get as much exposure into what actually working in law is like. And that is going to be really valuable in actually being able to do well in any kinds of applications, and seeing that this is something you really do want to do. You can look at things like pro bono work, legal aid kind of work that's you can volunteer for. There is, of course, that option. Look for part-time roles as well, legal assistant part-time roles. Of course, this will have to be part-time given that you are on a full-time course right now. But in terms of the traditional internship kind of things, I would still say vacation schemes are what is really available in the legal industry outside of just in commercial firms, if that's the area that you're interested in. But if you're interested in the bar, things like shadowing a barrister, really helpful. And somebody in the panel mentioned going to court. So the Old Bailey is the one I would recommend. It's actually quite fun to go to that one. And that's criminal cases, so more drama, yes, but that's the one I would recommend.
That's great. There was another question about what pro bono legal experience you could get. So volunteering, something like this. We mentioned the Citizens Advice Bureau earlier. If you volunteer maybe for something, a charity that's involved in the legal process, it could be a refugee charity.
Yes.
Any kind of way you're giving advice or helping others with kind of legal processes. Any other things that you've seen people do in your time on CVs?
So if you're looking for pro bono work, some other places I would recommend, look at the Free Representation Unit. They have a lot of opportunities as well. Dentons runs a pro bono clinic called Poplo, which also takes a lot of students for volunteer work. And there is a website called LawWorks where you will find opportunities in pro bono legal work or volunteer legal work from a variety of different agencies or organizations that have a role available. So a lot of the pro bono roles will be advertised on there. So those are some I would recommend to look for, aside from, of course, things like the Refugee Law Clinic, Citizens Advice Bureau for some pro bono experience.
That is super helpful. Another question, and it happened, I think, once or twice. What about if you're a scientist on the call and you're not from a humanities background, from your science, maybe studying physics, chemistry, maths, whatever it might be? Do you see that as, do recruiters like that kind of background, Sarah? Do you see that coming through?
They do, especially in some particular areas like IP. So things like patent attorneys, for that pathway, having a science degree is actually a requirement. So you need to go in from a science background. So for those kinds of areas, it is really helpful. Also, if you're depending on what kind of area of science you're practicing, you could consider things like medical law, aerospace, marine. There are options, and you could just go into commercial law. There's no limitation that you could be a doctor for 10 years and then decide to go into law. I mean, why would you do that? But you can.
That's a great question. Now, the last question we've got typed in the chat, unless anyone sticks another one in, is about grades. Okay, so the key question is, they've mentioned are A-levels important, but let's scale it right back. So in the UK, you'll do a GCSEs at 16, you'll then go to A-levels at 18, you'll then do your degree, your first degree. How important are all those different grades? Are there certain benchmarks we need to hit to really be in the running to get a training contract or secure a job? What do you think? Any advice?
So if you're applying for, if you want to go into one of the large commercial city firms, they are very competitive. So you just need to give yourself the best chances possible. With regards to grades for training contract applications, they will ask for every single grade from GCSE level onwards. For GCSEs and A-levels, the main thing they want to see is that you didn't completely fail and there was a certain amount of consistency. That's the important bit there. But as you go further along and the more recent they do matter. And it's very competitive. They have 2,000 applications for 20 seats, and they have to find a reason to reject all the 1,980. And grades is as good as any reason for that. But there is always the chance to explain it in extenuating circumstances, and they really do pay attention to those. So it's not that grades are the end all for getting into law.
Nice, excellent. Okay, so they've got to be good, but if you've got other things as well, that can help you on the journey.
Yeah.
But it is competitive, so hence why you're on the call. And for those who are on the call, so that's probably about 19 or 18 of you that stay to the end, hope these little Easter eggs have given you something extra in your journey to law. And thanks for being with us. It remains to say, if you've got any other questions, please do book in. The number was on the call. We'll circulate the slides, and then the talk will be on the Careers Discovery feed on your QM Careers Hub. Thanks so much for joining us. We'd love to help you out on this journey, and it's a fascinating journey with many twists and turns and challenges, but we're here to help. So please do use your career service. Guys, have a fantastic evening, and thanks for being on the call. Cheers.
Thank you.